Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I was a circus performer before I ever called myself a rigger. But somewhere along the state fair circuit, I learned that the air is only friendly when steel and knots say so. On load-in mornings, before the kettle corn or the calliope music or the first kid with a balloon sword, it was all truss and tape measures, wind checks and torque. We rolled in before sunrise at Wisconsin State Fair Park, West Allis, just west of Milwaukee, on a Tuesday in late August, when the sky was a washed-out blue and dew slicked the aluminum steps of our trucks. The exposition center threw a long shadow across the midway, and Spin City, an arch of rides with neon cartwheels, slept in without lights. You could smell dairy barns if the breeze cut right, and the fresh dough for cream puffs if it didn't. The Milwaukee Mile racetrack sat like a quiet stadium around everything, concrete and history in one breath. I worked with a harness on and a crescent wrench looped in a holster, half acrobat and half technician. In the program I was Skyline because I did a solo rope act 70 feet up, a slow coil and fall that made quiet people cry. But within the tent, everyone just called me Marco. Our ringmaster, Omar Valdez, velvet voice, velvet coat, said stage names were for tourists. "Give me a 30-foot downstage line, clean and true," Gina called from the center ring. She ran rigging for the troupe, hard hat, clipboard, coffee that could strip paint. Her laser measure flickered against the main mast of the big top, a white ridge of canvas that once belonged to another show. We bought it secondhand and treated it like a friend we didn't always trust. "And check those guy points. Weather says gusts later." "Guy points are already at 4-1, I said. "I'll bump them to 5. Gina looked up at me on the ladder, nodded, and tapped the wind meter clipped to her vest. 5 makes me sleep better. We were a tight outfit, the kind that loads in without shouting. We had the trapeze pair, Luca and Sophia, married in a way that made their catches look like secrets exchanged. We had Lila on spotlight, part poet, part electrician, who could tint a cue like watercolor. We had Darnell, a rides mechanic, doing a circus season because the road pays cash and keeps your hands honest. He liked to fix what the crowd never sees. We had a dog act with rescues that did comedy better than most comics, and one cat act that was not comedy at all, no matter how many smiles our trainer tried to pin on it. Her name was Renee Armitage. She had USDA paperwork so neat it looked like lace, and a walk that said she knew everyone would have an opinion about her cats. The leopards were older, sanctuary rescues she wouldn't call pets. They were part of her life the way water is part of a ship. Necessary, heavy, always moving beneath. She kept them in travel crates whose welds she personally inspected every morning, and she never let the public within 15 feet. People said all sorts of things about animal acts. Renee said one thing: "I'm responsible for them." It was not fierce, it just didn't bend. By lunchtime, we had the big top skeleton upright and the canvas straining like a sail. The apex was 30 meters, 98 feet, but our work lived lower. At the flying rig I'd assembled with Gina. Triangular truss, top spreader, lower catcher bar, net stretched to a taut drum. We backed it all up with steel from Peerless and hardware from CM, spread our load with shackles rated so high they made the ground feel like sea. The net took 3 of us to lace, and I checked every knot twice. Double fisherman's, figure 8 follow-through, water knot on the webbing where I'd sewn in fresh keeper loops. I trusted knots. They never pretended to be anything else. At 3, I climbed to the back lot to check on Renee's lane. Her cats were in the shade of a trailer awning behind the tents, with 2 horses dozing in portable panels and a pair of camels chewing their way through boredom. Fairs were changing. Most places didn't want exotic animals anymore. Renee had a special show that was half talk, half demonstration on behavior and the grace of things that mostly wanted to be left alone. The leopards didn't leap through hoops. She didn't carry a chair. She wore Kevlar-lined sleeves under a linen jacket and spoke softly about the way animals move around fear. "You're late," she said, passing me a bottle of water and a glance that asked a question without words. "How's our sky?" "Sky will hold," I said. "Wind's lazy. You good?" She nodded at the leopards, who lay like stripped shadows in their crates. "They're good. You hear about the news?" "What news?" I took a drink. The bottle was warm. The sun found my shoulders every time I stood still. "Something downtown," she said. "They're calling it riots." She put quote marks in the air like they might fence the word in. "I heard it on the radio while I was topping water. Darnell said he saw a clip, but you know how clips are." I sighed. I know how clips are. We'd been getting little storms of rumor all summer. Cities with flash mobs that weren't even mobs. Talk of a sickness in one place, people standing silent in traffic in another. You learn to keep your world small on the road. You take the day they give you. Omar had already said the show would go as scheduled. We'd weathered big news before. People wanted an hour under a tent that smelled like sawdust and spun sugar. We did our first 2 shows at 4 and 6 to good crowds. The red and gold benches filled up with families who wanted the animals and the antics, the aerials and the lights. Lila did magic with a pair of Fraynals that were older than all of us and somehow still made new shadows. I did my rope act at the 6, sliding into the quiet of it until the applause made me remember the world had other people in it. Afterward, Omar gathered us under the tent's side flap while the ushers swept and reset. He had a calm like a lighthouse. "There's chatter about trouble on the news," he said. "We're staying put. We've got State Fair Park police on site and an EMT team in the exposition center. If anything shifts, we follow their lead. Phones stay on vibrate. Gina, keep an eye on wind and the wires. Renee, you do what you always do. We've got 2 more shows. Then we eat." No one argued. That's something we'd learned too, how to follow a voice you trust. You learn crews by how they glance at one another when plans change. Ours didn't flinch. We rolled the 8 o'clock show back 10 minutes to let people find seats, then took them out of themselves on cue. I remember the smell when it started. Not smoke, not anything we'd trained for. It was warm asphalt in a sudden cool, the way a storm pulls heat into the air. The trapeze act always closed the main set because there's nothing after a clean triple at that height. Luca had caught everything all day. His timing was a metronome. The music went big, the crowd did that held breath thing that makes the tent feel like it's listening, and Sophia launched from the flybar, knees tucked, turning clean and bright as a thrown coin. Luca reached. My hands knew the catch before my eyes did, that tiny clap of locked wrists that is more promise than sound. He missed. It rarely happened, but it was why the net was there. She fell into white, bounced, rolled, exactly as we practiced, then slid sideways as the net took her weight, the rebound tipping the edge up and over the ring curb. A good net is a rectangle of safety built to give, but they are never part of a plan. A bad bounce can throw a performer in a direction no one expects, and tonight the angle found the wrong side. She slid in a blur toward the aisle, down that small slope where we never had crowd, not that close. She hit the green carpet runner, skidded into 2 folding chairs, and tumbled into a knot of people halfway up an aisle. A sound went through the tent, the kind crowds make when they realize they're in the story instead of watching it. I was already on the ladder, shouting to Gina, body moving before thoughts. I could see Sophia push up like a diver breaking the surface. She was fast, of course she was, Training is a way to make reflex into rescue. She was already on her knees, hands up, apologizing to the man nearest her. The man was a big guy in a brewer's cap, and he was smiling like people do when a miracle happens inches from their knees. Then he jerked. It was small, then it wasn't. He lurched forward like a string pulled his chest. His mouth opened wide and too long, and his arms came up the way a child reaches in a dark room. His hands closed on Sophia's shoulders, and he drove her backward into the seats behind. For a heartbeat, I thought I was watching a bad run, a lesson in front-of-house chaos. Then the man bent to her shoulder and pressed his face there and didn't let go. The first scream was a thin thread. The second was a sheet. Ushers moved fast. Our crew drilled for stampede more than any other emergency, and Lila hit the house lights hard while Omar's voice rolled rich and steady over the PA. "Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. Our attendants will guide you to the nearest exits." The show music cut to silence like a door shutting. I reached the aisle as the net team unhooked. Gina vaulted the ring curb and was at the upstage edge of the net, yelling for clearance. The crowd was already surging towards the tent doors, and the aisle where Sophia lay had become a bottleneck of people trying to back away from what they didn't understand. The man in the brewer's cap lifted his head. His face, what I'll say, looked wrong around the edges, like paint that's still wet. His eyes were too wide. He made a sound like a swallowed breath and reached for the next person in reach. Sophia stood. She shouldn't have been able to, not with the impact she'd taken, not with a grown man's weight pulling her down, but she was on her feet in a blink and moving in a way that wasn't Sophia. Not in any movement class I knew. She stutter-stepped, shoulders hunched, hands curled like she was about to take a bar that wasn't there. The man who'd grabbed her reached again and she turned. Not quick and cat-clean like she always did, but rough, like something in her had been moved and put back not quite in place. When she stepped toward the next person, when the crowd flinched and stumbled and someone shouted, "Don't let them touch you," I heard it. The word the news had been using like a dare. I said it under my breath because words can build a fence or a path, and that one only built fences. "No," I said to the word itself. And then I moved. I didn't do anything heroic. I didn't pull out a move I'd learned in a stunt class. I did the thing that riggers do. I changed a path. The aisle was a funnel, so I took the rope bag from my belt, the kind with a weighted throw line you'd use to get a messenger over a beam, and I flipped it hard across 3 rows at knee height. It caught 2 seat backs and a stanchion we'd moved earlier. I yanked the slack and cinched it with a figure 8 on a bite to the ring curb. Then I had a waist-high barrier where there hadn't been one. Something to make bodies turn instead of crush. People tripped and rolled, and then got up on the other side of something that wasn't an aisle anymore. "Clear the rear exits," Omar called. He had moved to the center, hands easy like when he tames an audience in the rain. "Follow the ushers. We'll take care of our own." He meant Sophia. He meant that we don't leave family in a mess we made. Darnell slid in next to me with a CO2 extinguisher and a rubber mallet. "You call it," he said. "Fog them low," I answered. He popped the handle and the white wash rolled over the aisle from ankle to waist. "We use CO2 to clear lines sometimes, to check airflow or wake a stubborn firework that won't ignite. It starves the air enough to cool tempers too." The white cloud hit the faces of the 2 people who were still too close, and they staggered back with a cough. In the wash, the man in the cap lost his bearings. He waved his hands, groping for something that wasn't there, and for a heartbeat the aisle belonged to us. Gina, who had left the net half-dropped like a broken sail, arrived with 2 duffels and the look she got when making a plan. "Zip everything we can," she said. "No steel left to grab, no free lines for someone to climb. Marco, you and Darnell get the east side flap open. Lila, flood that exit with light. were creating a lane. Omar's voice was still velvet and iron. "Exit east, please. Exit east. Keep your hands up and your eyes forward." The aisle shifted. Crowd dynamics have rules, like water through a pipe, and if you take away corners, you get flow. We pulled the sidewall up and tied it high with rabbit lines so daylight fell across the grass. The big top transformed, not a place, but a direction. People moved. In the moving, I lost sight of Sophia. I saw Luca, still up on the catcher platform, clutching a rope with both hands, face white beneath the stage powder we used to hold light. He was shouting her name as if sound could thread a needle through a haystack. I didn't try to shout him down. Sound has a job. It was doing it. The last of the benches emptied, and I saw Renee in the upstage wings, hand on the kennel cart where the young leopard was crated for showtime. She hadn't brought the cats into the ring tonight. She never did when crowds were too wild, but she kept one on the move near her because the cats hated being left behind when the team went on. The cat was quiet. Renee wasn't. Her eyes were a storm. "Backlot," she said, and I realized I was moving with her, already knowing the place she'd need another person. "We have to make a call." Outside the tent, the midway had broken into 100 small scenes. Music still played from a ride that hadn't been shut down. The operator, a teenager in a bright vest, was trying to coax his riders out car by car. A father knelt in the lights of a fried dough booth, tying his kid's shoe with hands he held too steady. Someone ran by with a roll of tickets clutched like life. The park police in their polo shirts were everywhere at once, doing calm with their hands low and radio mics high. From the grandstand speakers, a voice that was not Omar's asked everyone to move to the nearest exit and stay with family. We cut through the service corridor that ran between tents and barns. Renee's backlot sat tight against a row of white trucks and a swath of grass. The two horses, a pair of shaggy gypsies who could carry a tiny stage on their backs without complaint, wheeled in their panels when they saw us. The camels stared like wooden statues at the horizon. The leopards lay in their crates, eyes half-lidded, entirely still in that way that makes you wonder if big cats dream differently than we do. Renee stopped dead. She looked at each gate like a person looks at a packed suitcase when the sirens start. "If the crowd spills, they'll come through here," she said. "If they come through here, the panels go. If the panels go..." She pictured horses in a crowd, camels, cats that weren't part of the plan. She set her jaw so gently I barely saw it move. "I can move the cats into the truck," she continued. "I can get the horses and camels to the west pasture at the mile. There's a service gate. But if anything, if anyone..." She didn't finish. Some sentences don't have middles. "I'll hold the line," I said, and only then realized I was still holding the CO2 extinguisher, and my hook knife hung bright at my belt. We all carried one. Webbing catches on a burr and becomes a noose. A hook knife is how you say no to that. I checked the blade and snapped it back. "We can stretch a line across the alley, make a funnel." She nodded once. "Give me 90 seconds, then we start." We worked like it mattered, because it did. I ran a 15-meter length of static line through 2 trailer hitches, raised it to chest height with a prosic and a micro pulley, and lashed the bitter ends to a pair of T-stakes well sunk. Darnell, heaven bless him, had already shown up with a bag of ratchet straps and the grin he wore when countersinking bolts on a Carnival ride no one should ever look at too closely. 2-inch polyester, he said, and he tossed me one. 10,000 well allel. We won't break it. We'll just break the habit of walking through here. We zigzagged the straps into a weaving fence that turned the backlot into a maze, only we knew. In 3 places we left wide loops we could pull taut and close if we had to. Renee clipped the wheels of her cat crates to the floor rings in her truck, shut the aluminum door, and locked it. The horses loaded like saints. The camels allowed themselves to be led like people who had made peace with waiting. "Go," Renee told me when she had the second camel halfway up the ramp. Her hands shook only in the last finger. "Find Omar, find Sophia. I'll follow the service road by the raceway wall and meet you by the west gate when the crowd lets me. If anything weird happens, everything is weird," she said, and the corner of her mouth ticked upward for one heartbeat. "But, okay, if anything impossible happens, I head to the livestock barn, cinder block. Only 2 entrances. I know the dunk tank guy. He'll help me block them." There are moments when the fair looks like a miniature city. Street grids and service alleys and trash runs and electric. I took one of those grids now, cutting behind a food court where they had shut down deep fryers and started handing out bottled water like the full moon rises. The big wheel loomed quiet over everything, lights still bright in a halo. You could see the freeway beyond, a silver promise running east. I found Omar near the main tent, Lila beside him with the spotlight case and a loop of gaffer tape around her wrist like a bracelet. In emergencies, certain items become jewelry. "How is she?" I asked, and I didn't have to say who. He took a breath that had years in it. "Not here," he said. "Gone in the crowd. Luca came down and went after her. State Fair Park police are moving people out in zones. We're in the middle of a big tide. We need to get to the south gate at 84th Street and help load folks onto buses. That's the official plan. Our plan is to keep our people and anyone within arm's reach on their feet until we get there. After that," he looked up at the wheel, "after that, we figure out what this is." Over his shoulder, I saw a shape I knew and didn't know. It was Sophia, moving wrong. She had that stutter step again, the barless reach. Dried stage powder had streaked her cheeks. 2 families backed away in instinctive arcs, shepherding their kids with hands that made soft shields. Luca showed from the side like a bolt, face open, eyes full of a word we're not supposed to say on stage. "Sophia," he said, gentle, like tenderizing a syllable. He extended both hands so she could take one. She didn't. She moved toward a teenager in a fair t-shirt who had been collecting garbage in a rolling bin before the night turned sideways. The kid stood his ground like a post. He had a broom. He held it like possibility. "Don't," Luca said to her, and the way he said it made something in my chest go tight. He took a step too close and she turned the angle he gave her into an opening that wasn't. Her hands reached for him and he flinched, not from fear, but from the memory of velocity, how it carries you even when you want to stop. He stumbled, and I was moving without thinking, raising the CO2 extinguisher so the horn pointed low. I popped the lever, and the fog bloomed between them like a curtain dropping. Sophia backed through the cloud like a dream. Luca coughed and fell to his knees. I grabbed his forearm and pulled, and he came up like a man stepping out of water. He looked at me like I might explain the physics of whatever had taken his world and moved the furniture inside it. She fell, and then He stopped. "There are stories you only finish later." "She wasn't hurt," he finished, and it was the strangest thing anyone said all night. "Help me with the line," I told him, "because labor is a raft. We're going to build a way out." We had truss, tents, trucks, fences, rides, a city of anchor points if you knew where to look. Gina took one glance at the Ferris wheel support and the steel of our own main mast and said, "High line." We'd done them for fun and practice, a zip of cable and a trolley to shoot a clown into applause, but this wouldn't be a stunt. This would be a bridge. "We can tension a 7/16 cable from the wheel support to the ring truck," she said. "Petzl pulleys. 2 anchors at the truck, the hitch in a tree. We ferry people over the moving crowd." "Strength?" I asked, because you always ask numbers. 4 to 1 at least, she said. "Cable's rated for 10,000. Pulleys will squeal, but they'll take it. We're not hauling cars, we're hauling people. We threw the line like we'd drilled it. Messenger first, then the cable itself, fed high with a boat hook. A minding pulley on a prusik as a backup. We built a tensioning system with a progress capture and a capstan on the truck hitch, and we made the last 6 feet mean something by turning the ratchet until the cable hummed like an instrument. Darnell slammed a set of wheel chocks under the truck with the sledge he had carried since load-in like a favorite book. The high line ran over the aisle like a drawn horizon. We clipped a trolley on and hung a bosun's chair beneath. Seatbelt through metal loops, a second lanyard as backup, and the line found its angle toward the ring truck 20 yards away. Lila, who lacked the upper body heft for hauling, kept her hands on the second rope, the tagline, to prevent pendulums. Omar stepped forward like a game show host and a kindergarten teacher combined, leading with kindness and confidence. "Step right up, friends," he called, voice easy and wide. "Sit down, clip in, and let the team send you on a slide toward the south exit. We did this just so we could see you smile." People smiled because he told them to. Terror and hope share muscles. They climbed into the chair, little ones first, then the old, then anyone with the legs that shook too much to run. We ferried them out of the tangle one by one, a small family gliding over a crowd that had lost its manners, and then found them again when the show told it how. If you think this sounds ridiculous, that's because you haven't seen what people will trust under a tent. It's why we do this. Trust is our only currency that never runs out. While they slid, I scanned the line for Renee in the corridor beyond. Nothing yet. Then a honk that didn't belong to any clown car. The camels appeared in the distance in that odd, rolling stride God wrote after a long walk. Behind them, a panel truck with our show logo nosed along the back of the raceway wall. Hazard flashers bodying the kind of calm that lets others breathe. "Service gate," I shouted to Gina. "Copy," she said. And in just under 2 minutes, she had a second line rigged lower for hand over hand with cargo handles for people who didn't want to sit. Darnell laughed outright, a burst of joy at the way a plan can become a thing you can touch. We got maybe 20 people out like that before the night changed again. A wave of bodies pushed from the north, and the movement had a rhythm you never want to learn. It wasn't panic, it was the absence of it, the deliberate, steady way people move when they're not in themselves anymore. The wave hit our alley, and the ratchet strap fence held, then bowed, then brightened with the stress of being what it wasn't designed to be. We were about to be a lever. "Close loop, eh?" I called, and Lila snapped her gaffer tape bracelet off and threaded the loop with a speed that would have made a sailor nod. She yanked the loose into a tighter line. We had a choke point again. The wave flowed around it, spilling into a wider space the way a river takes a rock and makes a poem. In that opening, I saw 3 State Fair Park police officers moving like a wedge, uniforms clean, voices low and clipped into their mics. A woman in front, silver bun, eyes like a good schoolteacher, caught my eye and gave me a nod that communicated more than words. We were both running the same playbook without comparing notes. "South Gate," she called. "Follow the sound, not the crowd. If you can help, help. If you can't, keep walking, don't look back." I thought of Renee speaking about fear, how you could make an animal freeze by being a wall, or move by being a path. We were making paths. It felt like the only thing that separated us from chaos was the language we used to describe it. We slid another 5, maybe 6. Then Darnell cursed softly. "Wheel shutting down power," he said. The big Ferris wheel dimmed by degrees, light by light, like a time-lapse of night. The station at the base made that descending whine of machinery coming to rest. The operator, a guy with a beard and patience, locked his panel, checked his safety chain twice, and waved at us helplessly with both hands open. He did his job, Darnell said. Respect. The cable didn't care whether the wheel spun. Our anchor still held. We kept hauling. In the pause between runs, I felt something tug at my sleeve. A girl of maybe 9. Pink raincoat even though it hadn't rained, eyes storm cloud serious. "Sir," she said, "do you know where the animals are, the ones who do the tricks?" I did 2 things I didn't know I could do at once. I lied well and told the truth. "They're with the person who loves them most," I said. "They're going somewhere quieter. We're going there too." Her shoulders loosened. She trusted the sentence that was on me to earn. To earn it, I had to leave. On a map, our path back to the livestock barn was a simple L. In the night, it was a hallway full of elbows. Omar saw where my eyes went and said, "Go," before I asked. "We'll send anyone who knows our names to the raceway wall. We'll tell them to follow the camels. Not many sentences will carry further." "Stay with Luca," I said uselessly. Because he would, because he knew what to do. If she comes back," Omar said gently, and he pressed a hand to my shoulder. "We will be ready to be kind." There are moments where the human brain splits time into beads. Running between booths that had been giving out lemonade 1 hour and calm words the next, I could feel each footfall as a derived vector. Forward and down, impact and release, weight and work. Rigging teaches you that even falling has a curve. I followed curves, this alley, that gap, the space between a generator and a fence. Someone grabbed for me and I let them have my sleeve and then gave it back. I moved with people and not against them because water remembers the shape of the riverbed. "Patsy," I turned the corner by the dairy barn and saw the animals before I saw Renee. Not the leopards, they were locked down inside the truck, but the horses. 2 small moons in the dark, ears pricked, standing hip to hip in the open door of a cinder block barn. Renee had done everything she said she would. She had reversed the truck to the barn like a loading dock, moved the leopards' crates inside, and set 2 full water buckets in front of each door. The camels were hunkered in the back like a pair of uncles who had seen longer nights. The barn smelled like hay and something steady. It was the calmest place I'd been since the miss on the trapeze. Renee leaned against a stanchion with her head bowed. When she lifted it at my footsteps, she had 2 different looks on, one for me and one for the night. "Decision point," she said, and that was all. We stood like that, 2 people with 100 pounds of questions between us. The questions were colder than the air outside. Do we open the leopards' crates and gamble that they run for the river, not the midway? Do we leave them in, knowing we might be leaving them to thirst if we can't get back? Do we release the horses and trust the instinct that has saved their kind for millennia, that they will find space and a fence and the edge of a field? Do we lash everything down and defend the door? I saw the kid in the pink raincoat again without seeing her. The question under her question had been this one. "You've got water for a day, maybe 2, I said out loud, because numbers make choices less like cliff edges. You can get more from the spigot if the feed room stays clear. The cats are safer crated than wandering this. If they bolt, they become a problem for people who didn't ask to handle that kind of beauty. If they stay, they're your responsibility tomorrow, not a stranger's tonight." Renee nodded, one slow motion, a bow to logic she hated and would follow. "Horses," she said. "They can't stay confined if the crowd comes. They'll break a leg or a panel. If I take them to the racetrack inside rail and let them go there, they'll circle until I call them. They know my voice. The camels. Follow the horses," I said, because even camels get lonely. We did it quickly. She walked the horses with halters to the tunnel that led under the grandstand, 2 lights guiding like an airplane taxi line. They stepped onto the track like they remembered competing here in another life. She unclipped and let them go with the kind of quiet you only hear when you're doing something that asks you to justify it later. The camels went next, heads high, eyes unusual and good. Back at the barn door, she paused, one hand on the crate door of the older leopard, the one with a cataract clouding his left eye. He blinked up at her with a look that made a liar out of anyone who said cats don't understand you. She whispered something I didn't hear, then laid her palm flat and felt his breath against the metal. "You stay," she said. "You're safer if you hate me." We were leaving when Officer Silver Bun from the park police appeared in the doorway, a new voice behind her like a new page. "We're moving everyone with wheels and legs to the south gate," she said. No wasted words. "Shuttle buses outbound to the stadium lots and the interstates. We've got reports. We're acting on what we can see." "What we can see," Renee repeated softly, making sure the words fit. "We'll follow." "Be advised," the officer added in the calmest way a person can carry bad news. "We've had incidents where people who were injured stood back up and behaved unpredictably. Keep your distance from anyone who moves toward you without explaining why. Keep your hands open. Keep eye contact. Keep moving. We'll open a lane for you." I thought of the catch, the miss, the bounce, the way Sophia got up. I filed the unity of those images under a word I did not say. I nodded and thanked the woman for telling the truth plainly. It makes 2 people co-owners of a thing. We took the service road alongside the inner fence of the racetrack, the white rail guiding us like a line drawn by a giant. The grandstand to our left held shadows of 1,000 summers. Tonight, it was a lighthouse of empty seats. The south gate was a hive of buses and park staff and neighbors who had opened flatbed trailers like stages. People climbed aboard like it was obvious, because it was. The state fair is good at building little cities. Tonight, it had to evacuate one. At the gate, I saw Omar on the back of a school bus. His coat off, sleeves rolled, hair damp. Lila was beside him with a little battery-powered light she'd magneted to the bus frame so the steps glowed like a portal. Luca sat on the curb holding a thermos from a concession stand, hands wrapped around it like it could teach him what heat is. I pulled Renee into the circle of them with a gesture we'd practiced all summer when we shook off rain and started late. "Horses and camels are looping the mile," I said. "Cats are crated with water. The barn is solid. We're going to get on a bus and then get off a bus and then find a place to sleep. Then we're going to call every number we have and make a list and check it twice." "North Pole style," Darnell said wearily, appearing like a stagehand stepping into a spotlight by mistake. "List of naughty and nice." "No lists like that," Omar said, but he smiled, a small corner thing you tuck in a pocket. The bus pulled out and the city shrank behind us in reverse. Spin City's lights cupped the dark. The wheel sat still and then got smaller. The freeway took us like a river, east toward the stadium lots where someone had set up cones and signage faster than any planning meeting could have done. We got off in a line and moved among families whose faces all looked like versions of one another in the hours after a too-fast ending. We found a corner of a lot with a low wall that made a windbreak. We made a camp because showfolk can turn anything into a backstage. 2 aluminum cases as seats, a tarp as a roof, a thermos as a heart. Someone handed around individually wrapped sandwiches that must have been bought for a VIP tent and then liberated by a person with a better idea. Water came in flats. Blankets appeared like a magic trick. I finally checked my phone and saw a list of messages that went on forever. Half from other shows, half from people who remembered I was alive. I typed a sentence to my sister that said I was safe, Because that's the kind of thing you say even when it's a hope in a coat. We sat. We breathed. We held quiet like a fragile glass. Omar assembled us with a look, no call. We have family meetings without chairs. "We're here," he said. "We'll be somewhere else later. Tonight, we get a count." "Renee?" "Here," she said. "Marco?" "Here." "Gina?" "Here." She raised her hand in the half-light and added, because this is who she is, "Highline worked like a charm. I want to find a way to make it deploy faster. We'll do a drill next chance." "Darnell?" "Here." "Lila?" "Here." He paused. "Luca?" Luca's answer was quiet and strong, like a steel cable under paint. "Here." "Sophia?" Omar asked the knight. Because he had to. He waited as if the pause itself were an altar. "Search tomorrow," he said at last. "We work with the park police. We don't go alone. We do not turn ourselves into another rescue. We use our skills, we keep our people, and we act in a way that would make a parent proud to hand us a child. We are not in the show anymore. We are in something else. But the same rules apply. We hold lines. We make paths, and we don't let each other fall." Renee raised a hand. "I'll need to go back for the cats early," she said. "At first light. They'll be stressed by the noise." "We go together," I told her. "I'll go too," Luca said, voice even. "I know the pattern of the grounds. If traffic flows are weird, I can find the quiet seams." "3 is a crew," Omar said. "You'll meet with the park police first, then go. No windmills, all plans. Take radios if you can get them. Check in every 10 minutes. If you miss 2 checks, you come back, or we come to get you with a rope." "Copy," Renee said. She smiled for the first time since the barn. It was a tired smile, but true. We slept in a way that isn't sleep. Heads on cases, feet in loops of rope like we might need to be dragged toward dawn. When morning scraped the sky pale, the world had that washed-out feeling of after. A concert field, a sandbar, the first church service after a flood. We found an officer with a clipboard and made a plan like real people do. At the fairgrounds, the air felt cauterized, like the night had burned the oxygen out of it. We moved in a line, hands loose, eyes up. The midways were mostly empty except for things that had fallen over and the threads of a few stories that hadn't ended yet. A string of bunting tangled in a fence, a flipped stroller, a single shoe. We followed the inner rail of the track to the barn and found it as we'd left it. Door shut, crate doors latched, water buckets light but not empty. The camels lay on their sides like ships. The leopards blinked at us and yawned, a deep, silent turn of jaw that showed a language of mornings older than ours. We topped water and called the horses from the center of the track. They came like they had learned our names, huffing in quiet snorts that sounded like apologies. Renee put bridles on with hands that tried to tell the story to the leather. The leather understood. We walked them back to the barn and let them eat like the world wasn't a stranger. We were halfway through filling a backup trough when a figure moved at the far end of the alley. The way she walked told me who it was before the colors of her clothes made sense. Sophia. She looked like someone wearing a body like a coat they had found on a bench. She moved with intention, then drift. She turned her head toward sounds and not voices. When she saw us, she did not speed up. She didn't slow. She adjusted, like a vector trying a new solution to an equation. "Sophia," Luca said, soft and full of home. He stepped forward and kept both hands visible and low, like you do with a horse who might spook. She angled toward him in that same wrong right way. Luca stopped at a line in the dirt that only he could see. He waited. She closed the space to 3 feet. 2. He didn't reach. He let the air between them speak. Renee stood like a statue with a horse's lead in her hand and the universe waiting for her to twitch. Sophia's head ticked to the side like a bird hearing something any mammal would miss. She lifted a hand and touched Luca's sleeve where I had left a scuff of CO2 frost the night before. Her fingers traced the mark as if it were a map. He let her. She drew a line in the powder, then another, like she was trying to remember writing. She made something that could have been an S if you wanted to see it. Then she tilted her head and looked past him, past all of us, at something that none of us could call. "Stay with me," Luca whispered. His voice turned to thread. She took a step. He matched it sideways, not closer or back. Lateral, the way you do when you try to walk alongside a skittish thing without asking permission it doesn't have to give. She followed. He moved again. This is a thing people who handle animals know. You dance with distance. You lead by absence. He led her into the barn. He did not make the mistake of trying to close a door too fast or hold an arm too tight. He made the space a place she would choose to be. Renee set the horse lead on a hook so quietly I didn't hear the metal touch. She watched the calculus of love and physics and autonomy solve itself in the doorway. Then she looked at me. In her face was a question with no correct answer. "What happens next?" she asked. "We keep people away from her hands," I said. "We arrange the world so that she can not harm or be harmed. We ask for help from those who know more than we do. We do not let what we don't know make us mean." Renee exhaled. "We're not equipped," she said. "And yet we are." We spent the day turning a barn into a safe room that respected an unknown condition. We moved panels to create a circle with exits we controlled, left space for Luca to sit nearby where she could see him without being cornered. We hung sheets for soft walls, removed anything with sharp corners, set a bucket of water inside in case thirst remembered how to ask. We put a bell on a line between two posts so it would chime if someone approached without thinking. We put "Quiet Please" signs up in a font that looked like a library and not a warning. We became librarians of a new book. Outside, the fairgrounds transformed into a staging area for the morning after. Park staff in new vests walked with clipboards and determined steps. Volunteers funneled supplies into order. People came looking for lost things and found each other instead. The park police officer with the silver bun coordinated with an incident command team that had sprung up under the oaks like a well-planned plant. We offered what we could: labor, lifts, calm. When dusk brushed the barns, we drew our own circle again on the floor near the open door. Omar stood and told the day to the night like a story that asked to be remembered. He said the words we'd earned by using our hands and hearts in concert. It's okay to be scared. We are still a we. We will do tomorrow what we did today, which is the next right thing until we run out of right things, and then we'll make a new one. Show business, Darnell said, slouching against a hay bale. Turns out it was never the business part that mattered. We spent our lives learning to turn fear into awe, Lila added. Maybe that skill goes both ways. Gina checked the guy lines we'd thrown up for our tarp and nodded like she always did when a plan held. We're going to teach classes, she said. Knots for beginners. Building a line out of whatever you've got, making a clean exit. If people come asking how to make their porch hold a tarp, how to carry a kid across a stream on a line without becoming a statistic, those are things we know. Do we charge tickets or take canned goods? Cream puffs, Omar said, managing to find a smile, and the team laughed. A soft, tired sound that meant we were still allowed to be human. That night, I dreamed of a canvas roof breathing like a lung and the ocean sound of crowds. I woke to a bell and the rustle of a horse shaking off flies. Morning offered us the small mercy of light. With it came more people with maps and plans. With it came word from downtown and other fairs. With it came the understanding that the thing we had seen wasn't a night's oddity, but a new weather pattern. Some people who were hurt were getting back up and moving in that slow, wrong right way. Some didn't. Some did and then stopped. There were no edges to wrap around yet. We met the day like riggers meet a span they aren't sure about. We tested, we backed up, we refused to trust a single point. We stocked the cats with more water and a fan. We hacked a hand-washing station out of a water cooler and a garden hose. We held a class for 10 people who wanted to learn knots, more who wanted to learn how to make a stretcher out of a tarp and 2 poles. We ferried someone's grandma across a ditch on a line because the road had clogged and the ditch was faster, and when you can choose between friction and flow, you always choose flow. And we checked on Sophia every hour we could, in a way that felt like visiting a fire you are determined to keep contained. She paced, she sometimes sat, once she slept with her forehead against the painted cinder block like it had something to teach her. With Luca beside her, the wrongness dimmed, like noise being filtered. He read to her from a battered program, just their names over and over, like a spell. At sunset, Renee stood with me in the doorway and watched swallows take the air in loops so graceful it put a clean ache in my chest. "You know," she said, "when I was a kid and someone asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, I said a person who doesn't make things worse." She tipped her head. "Nights like this, I'm grateful for low standards." I laughed, and it came easier than I expected. "We made things better," I said, and it wasn't bravado. It was a ledger balanced, at least for the day. A handful of families lifted over a crowd, a pair of horses who trusted us enough to circle until we called them, a friend inside a room that never forgot her name, cats who would outlive this, and us. When it was too dark for swallows, we strung a line of LED work lights between posts and called it our own constellation. People drifted toward the glow because people always have. We made a stage without a stage and watched as a kid who had lost his backpack found his voice and told a joke so pure we had to bow our heads. We didn't put out a hat, we didn't need one. What we needed was to practice the muscle that keeps a world going. We did. We do. We will. Days layered. We did not become heroes, only a larger version of ourselves with heavier tools. We helped build a pedestrian bridge of pallets over a drainage ditch. We taught a grandmother to tie a bowline. We drew chalk arrows on asphalt and turned scattered feet into a path. Sometimes, when the air went cool, we took the bosun's chair out and gave someone a small flight over a safe gap just to make a child laugh where a child hadn't in a while. We moved the cats at dawn when fewer people were about, their crates steady like coffers of instinct. We kept the horses on the track and they became mascots, galloping at dusk as if to measure time. The camels stood at the rail like philosophers. We checked in with the park police officer who'd become more than a uniform. Her name was Kim, and she had a family in Bayview who made tamales that could make anyone believe in better endings. She made sure we had batteries. We made sure her line had a place to rest when they needed a place where no one asked them to speak. Luca took turns on the radio net for volunteers and learned the cadence of a voice that guides quietly. Omar wrote a sign and hung it where everyone could see when they came for help. We build paths. Tell us where you're stuck. And we waited for the part of the story we wanted to write. The morning a doctor or a lab or a person with a different word for what had happened came to the barn, looked at Sophia with eyes that were not afraid to see, and said a thing that gave us a new task that was not guarding a doorway with love. In the meantime, we did what circuses have always done when the world asks too much. We found a way to keep the tent up. We hung our weight from steel, we trusted knots, we let music hold the edges of a night. When a storm rolled in on the 5th day and wind pushed at the canvas tarps we'd strung, Gina's voice cut through the rain like a metronome. "Take the lines to 5 to 1, she called. "Back up your backups. Keep flags off clips. Watch the flapping edges." We clipped and checked and rolled and battened as if the storm were a show itself, because it was. The rain drummed on the roof and people packed beneath our light line, holding cups of soup that had started their lives as concessions, and now were currency of care. Renee counted breaths and buckets and had nothing left for fear. Through it all, the wheel stood at the edge of sight, a circle without a rider. When the clouds broke and the sun came down in shafts, the cabins gleamed. I pictured our high line from that first night, the way the trolley had hummed when the rope was exactly right, and I understood something about why we build. We are always threading cables between places that don't make sense until a line runs taut between them. The first time Sophia said a word, it was not a name. It was an instruction. Luca had dozed, sitting up, chin on his chest, the program fallen to the straw. Sophia looked at him and at the door and at me. She lifted one hand and pointed to the rope coil near the post. Her voice walked into the room like it had been told it could come home. "Anchor," she whispered. I handed her the coil. She didn't take it. She pointed to the post, and I tied a bowline slowly, letting her watch the rabbit come out of the hole and around the tree and back down, the way we teach kids so they remember. She nodded, once, then twice, like a metronome catching a beat. We wait, you and I. We keep tying knots that hold the parts we're allowed to hold. We leave doors open for the rest. We make paths where we can and lose sleep over the places where the ground won't take a stake. We are still show folk, even if the show is smaller and the audience is one person we love sitting inside a circle of panels. We clap when a child rides the bosun's chair and arrives on the other side brave. We take turns on watch, and we eat whatever shows up warm in a tray with a foil lid. We keep a line on the cats and a friend in a room, and a city on wheels looking for the next good place to park. I was a circus performer when the virus tore through the carnival, and what I learned under canvas held. You don't promise a perfect catch. You promise a net. You don't promise the wind will behave. You promise 5 to 1 and a backup. You don't promise the crowd a miracle. You promise to keep breathing and to tell the truth kindly and to build a path where there wasn't one yesterday. And when someone falls and gets back up in a way that breaks what you thought you knew, you don't build a wall 'cause you're scared. You build a room with soft walls and a door that works both ways, and you wait until the world brings better words than the ones the news tried out on a night when the lights were too bright. We are here. We will be somewhere else later. Between those two pins on the map, our job is always the same. Tie in. Check your partner. Mind the slack. Keep your weight in your hips. And never, not even for a breath, leave your hands empty when you can offer them as a line. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.